I left the garage at 1:30 in the afternoon, which never happens. I've been doing oil changes and brake jobs since I was 22, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've walked out mid-shift for anything short of a family emergency. That Tuesday it was bad chicken from the place down the block, a breakfast sandwich I ate at my workbench because I was running behind. By noon, I was sweating through my shirt. By 1, I was pretty sure I was going to be sick whether I made it to a toilet or not. I told my guy Marco to lock up at 5 and drove home without calling Diana first. That part matters, I didn't call. We'd been married 11 years. 11 years of me leaving at 7 in the morning and getting home between 6 and 8 depending on how backed up the bays were. Diana had been out of work for about 14 months by then. She'd been let go from a property management office, and the job search had gone slower than either of us wanted. I wasn't grinding it in her face. We had savings. I was pulling enough. I figured she'd find something eventually, and in the meantime the house was clean and dinner was usually on the table. And that felt like a reasonable arrangement between two people who'd been together long enough to stop keeping score on every little thing. What I'm saying is I trusted her. Not because I was naive, because 11 years of a person gives you a picture, and my picture of Diana was a woman who complained sometimes, who spent more than I liked occasionally, who could be distant when she was stressed, but who was fundamentally the same woman I'd married. I wasn't walking around suspicious. I wasn't checking her phone. I was just tired and sick, and I wanted my bed. I pulled into the driveway at 1:47. Her car was there, which was normal. She didn't have anywhere she needed to be. I let myself in through the front door, and Diana came around the corner from the kitchen fast, too fast, like she'd heard the car and positioned herself. She was in jeans and a blouse she wouldn't normally put on just to be home on a Tuesday. Her hair was done. I registered all of this in about half a second, and then I felt another wave of nausea and didn't care. "Hey," I said, "I'm sick, bad food, I need to lie down." "Oh, wow," she said, stepping toward me with her hand going to my arm. "You look terrible. Come sit down, I'll get you something." "I just need the bed," I replied. "The bedroom's a mess," she said quickly. "I've been cleaning." I looked at her. "Diana, I have food poisoning. I don't care about the mess." "The couch is right there," she insisted. "Let me get you a blanket, you'll be more comfortable." I was already moving past her toward the hallway. She followed me, and I could hear something in her footsteps too quick off rhythm. I didn't analyze it at the time. I just wanted to lie down. The bedroom door was mostly closed. That was a little unusual. We usually left it open, but I pushed it with my shoulder and walked in. The room looked fine. Bed made, nothing obviously out of place. Diana had come in right behind me and was already talking. Something about the sheets being damp from cleaning the mattress. I'd be more comfortable on the couch. She'd bring me water and crackers. And I stood there in the middle of the room just trying to decide if I needed the bathroom first. That's when I noticed the glass on the nightstand. My nightstand. There was a water glass on her side and a second one on mine. She could have been using both. That's not impossible. I looked at the chair in the corner, the one we used mostly as a place to throw clean laundry. Pushed partly under it was a pair of shoes. Men's shoes, not mine. I know my own shoes. My brain tried to give me something innocent. A plausible story. Some reason a pair of men's shoes would be under that chair that didn't mean what it clearly meant. Diana was still talking. Her voice had gone up half a register. Then the closet shifted. Not a loud noise. A small one, the kind a person makes when they've been standing completely still for too long and their knee finally gives a little. A settle. A shift of weight. Diana stopped talking. I looked at her, she looked at me. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then I walked to the closet and opened the door. What? Eric was crouched between my hanging work shirts and an old winter jacket, wearing his jeans but nothing else, holding his shirt balled up in his hand like he'd grabbed it off the floor in a hurry but hadn't had time to put it on. I knew him. That's the part that hit first before anything else. Not that there was a man in my closet, but that it was Eric. Eric from next door. Eric who'd knocked on my door 2 years ago to ask if he could borrow my floor jack and ended up staying 45 minutes talking about his truck's rear differential. Eric who waved at me from his driveway while I was taking out trash. Eric who had a wife named Rachel and T. Whoa, kids I'd watched ride their bikes up and down the street. Eric, who apparently had been walking into my house and into my bedroom while I was at work and doing whatever he wanted, and then hiding in my closet when I came home. He looked at me. He did this thing with his face, a quick recalibration like he was running through options. "Carlos, man," he said, "this isn't." I pulled him out of the closet by his arm. He stumbled forward and caught himself on the door frame, and Diana made a sound behind me. "Carlos, stop, just listen." And I was not listening to anything. Something had gone offline in my head, not completely. I wasn't blind, but whatever filter usually sits between what I feel and what I do had stopped working. Eric straightened up and put his hands out. "I know how this looks." I hit him. I'm not going to dress it up. I swung and caught him on the cheekbone, right side, and the sound of it was ugly, a flat, hard crack. His head snapped sideways and he went into the dresser, caught the corner of it with his shoulder, and went down to one knee. Diana screamed. Eric came back up faster than I expected, hands up now, actually scared, and that's when I grabbed him by the shirt he was still holding, grabbed it and him together, and shoved him toward the hallway. He was bigger than me by maybe 20 pounds, but he wasn't fighting back, not really, just trying to keep his feet under him. Diana was grabbing my arm, pulling, yelling my name. I got Eric to the front door and threw it open and shoved him through it. He stumbled down the 2 porch steps and caught himself on the railing. "Don't come back to this house," I said. "Don't come near me, don't come near her, walk away right now." He looked at me, face flushed, hand going up to his cheekbone, shirt still in his fist, and whatever he was thinking he kept it to himself. He walked, cut across the lawn toward his own house, not running but not casual either. I watched him until he got to his front door. Then I came inside and locked mine. Diana was standing in the hallway. She'd been crying, or was about to. Her arms were crossed over her chest. I stood there and looked at her for what felt like a long time but was probably 10 seconds. My hand hurt. My heart was going fast enough that I could feel it in my ears. I was still sick. That hadn't gone anywhere, but the nausea had shifted into something else. Some kind of adrenaline that was going to crash eventually and leave me feeling worse. "Okay," I said, "talk." "Carlos, she started. "Don't start with my name," I interrupted. "Don't start with I can explain. Just tell me what I just found." She unfolded her arms. "It's not what you think." I waited. It wasn't supposed to happen," she said. "It just—" "Diana," I said. My voice came out flat, which surprised me a little. I opened the closet door and Eric was standing in it with his shirt off. What is the version of that where it's not what I think? She looked at the floor. "How long?" I asked. She shook her head quick. It only happened a couple of times. It was a mistake, I know that. "How long?" I repeated. She didn't answer. I thought about the shoes under the chair, the practiced way she'd planted herself between me and the bedroom. The fact that Eric hadn't even had time to finish dressing before hiding, which meant whatever was happening, it had been interrupted fast enough that he'd grabbed his pants and not his shirt. That's not something you get good at the first or second time. "You steered me away from the door before I was even in the house," I said. "You were ready, he was ready. You knew exactly where to put him. That's not twice, Diana." She didn't say anything. "You're going to want to tell me the truth," I continued. "Because I'm going to find out regardless, and how honest you are right now is the only thing you have any control over." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Then she told me it had been longer than twice. What? I didn't yell. That's probably what she expected. The throwing things, the cursing, the dramatic blow-up she could point to later as evidence that I was unstable. I didn't give her that. I sat down on the couch and I asked her to sit across from me, and I told her I wanted to hear the whole thing in order before I decided anything. She sat, she smoothed her jeans with both hands a couple of times. Then she started talking. Twice became a few times inside the first minute. I let her talk without interrupting. I watched her face, watched what she did with her hands, watched where her eyes went when she had to decide what to say next. I'd grabbed my phone off the table before I sat down. I've got an app on it I use for work sometimes, a voice recorder, nothing special. I hit record and set the phone face down on the arm of the couch. I told her I wanted her account documented before she had time to rethink it. She acted to. Ally nodded. She thought that was reasonable. I think she thought that was me trying to stay calm, trying to process. Really, I was just thinking clearly enough to know that her telling me things herself was worth more than me figuring them out later. She started with how it began. Bored days at home, Eric working from his house some days, stopping by to check on things when I wasn't around. How it started with him coming over for coffee, which is a sentence that should probably be retired as an explanation for affairs because nobody believes it anymore, but that's what she said. One thing became another. She described it the way people describe things they're ashamed of but still, on some level, can't quite believe happened to them. Vague, passive, like the situation acted on her, and she mainly watched. I interrupted once. "How long total?" I asked. She looked at her hands. "About 8 months," she admitted. 8 months? I did the math backward in my head without meaning to. What I was doing 8 months ago, 7 months ago, 6. Whether there were nights I remembered coming home later than usual, whether I'd noticed anything and explained it away without knowing I was explaining it away. "In this house," I said, "while I was at work." "Yes," she confirmed. "Mostly when?" I asked. She said evening shifts were the best window. When I was working late and Rachel had taken the kids to her mother's or to activities. Eric would come over, usually through the back. She'd unlock the side gate for him and leave in time to be home before Rachel got back. That's what 8 months of practice looks like. A system, a schedule, my work schedule as the blueprint for when it was safe. She also mentioned the messages. She deleted them from her phone mostly, but she'd been sloppy with it. She said it in a way that made me think she didn't actually want me to find them, but that she also hadn't been particularly careful. And she mentioned, without seeming to realize what she was handing me, that they'd sometimes meet up away from the house too. A bar once or twice. A couple of lunches. She'd used the household card for some of it because Eric usually paid, but not always. I thought about that, the shared account. Small transactions, food, drinks mixed in with everything else, easy to miss if you weren't looking for them. "I want you to pack a bag," I said. "Enough for a few days." She looked up at Carlos. "I need you out of the house tonight," I said firmly. "We'll figure out the rest later, but right now I need you gone." "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "Your parents are 40 minutes away," I replied. Her expression shifted, the first thing close to panic I'd seen. She'd been managing her emotions pretty carefully since I sat her down, but the mention of her parents cracked something. I can't tell them," she protested. "I didn't say tell them anything," I said. "I said pack a bag and go. What you tell them is up to you." She didn't move for a moment, then she went to the bedroom. I sat on the couch with the recorder still running. I didn't feel anything clean. Not satisfaction, not relief, not righteous anger. It was more like the feeling after you've been in a car accident and you're standing on the side of the road and you're not hurt, but you're waiting for your hands to stop shaking before you try to use the phone. I heard the closet sliding open in the other room. I heard the particular sounds of my house, the hinge that squeaks, the floor that settles, and I sat there and waited for her to leave. What? She left around 7. I watched the car back out from the kitchen window. Then I sat down at the table and thought about what I had. I had a recording of Diana admitting the affair, giving me an approximate timeline, placing it inside my house, confirming that Eric used to come over after Rachel left with the kids, and mentioning purchases on our shared account. I had the memory of 2 glasses on the nightstand. I had a pair of men's shoes. I'd moved them to the kitchen counter, and I photographed them. I had Eric's belt on the floor between the bed and the wall, which I found when I went back into the bedroom. He'd left it behind in the scramble. I photographed that too. I went through the shared account transactions on my laptop. I wasn't looking for a major number. I knew better than to expect some dramatic revelation. What I found was smaller, a bar tab in an amount that made no sense for Diana alone, a restaurant charge on a Tuesday afternoon, a couple of others that didn't match any errand or occasion I could place. Nothing that would make a lawyer stand up and shout. Something that fit the pattern of what Diana had described. I didn't call a lawyer that night. I made a list of what I needed to do, in the order I needed to do it, and I ate crackers because my stomach still wasn't right, and then I picked up my phone. Rachel's number was in my contact. TS, that's the part I hadn't thought about until I was looking at it, how naturally her contact lived in my phone. Neighborhood stuff. A text once about whose car was blocking whose. Normal adjacency. I called her at 8:15. She picked up on the 3rd ring. I could hear one of her kids in the background. "Carlos," she said with mild surprise, normal neighbor surprise. "Rachel," I said, "I'm sorry to call this late. I need to tell you something about Eric." A pause. "What do you mean?" she asked. I told her plainly. I didn't editorialize. I said I'd come home sick that afternoon and found Eric half-dressed in my bedroom closet. I said Diana had confirmed to me that the affair had been going on for approximately 8 months, primarily at my house while I worked. I said I was calling her before Diana had a chance to warn Eric about what I knew so that she'd hear it from me first. She was quiet for long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Rachel," I said. "I'm here," she replied. Her voice had changed, flattened out. "You're saying this happened today?" "Yes, a few hours ago," I confirmed. "And Diana told you 8 months," she said. "That's what she said," I answered. Another pause. "I need to hold on," she said. I heard her put the phone down. I heard her tell one of the kids to go watch TV for a few minutes. Then she came back. "You said you have her saying this, recorded." "Yes," I confirmed. "I want to hear it," she said. I sent her the audio file while we stayed on the phone. I heard her open it on her end, heard Diana's voice coming through tinny and small, and I listened to Rachel not making a sound through most of it. When the key parts came through, about 8 months, mostly when Carlos was working late, after you'd taken the kids out, I heard Rachel's breathing change. She didn't cry, not on the phone with me. She went very still in the way you can hear through a phone. "He told me he was helping you with something," she said. "A couple of times, he said you needed help with your garage, some equipment." I hadn't asked Eric for help with anything in 2 years. She said she was going to check some things. Her own phone, her own records, dates against Eric's explanations, anything that didn't line up. She said she was going to take the kids to her sister's house that night. She said very carefully, "Thank you for calling me." And then she hung up. I sat in the kitchen for a while after that. Sometime after 9, Diana texted me from her parents' house. "Can we please talk tomorrow? I just need to know you're not going to do anything crazy." I didn't respond. What I did instead was send her parents the recording. Not with a long explanation, not with a narrative, just the audio file and a short message. "Diana asked me to let you know she's staying with you for a few days. She should tell you why. If she doesn't, this will explain it." Diana had already told them. She'd been on the phone with her mother in the car, I later found out, and the story she'd told was that I'd attacked Eric without provocation and she'd left for her safety. Her parents had believed her. They'd been ready to believe her. That's what she was counting on. The recording reached her father at 9:47 that night. He called her. I don't know exactly what was said. What I know is that by the following morning, Diana's plan to wait out my anger from the comfort of her parents' house had significantly changed shape. I called a lawyer on Wednesday morning. I'd found her through a guy at my shop whose divorce had gone as cleanly as a divorce can, meaning it was brutal but fair, and he'd ended up okay. I sat across from her in a conference room and laid out what I had. The recording, the photographs, the account records, the timeline. She was patient about it. She let me finish, and then she told me without sugarcoating it that infidelity in our state is not a lever that automatically tips every asset in my direction. It can be a factor in certain things, depending on the judge, but I shouldn't be planning my financial strategy around winning a moral argument in court. What mattered was what I could document and what the ownership and marital records actually showed. What they showed, as it turned out, wasn't bad for me. I'd bought the house 8 years ago before Diana and I were married. I had the mortgage in my name, the down payment pulled from savings I'd accumulated before I met her. After the wedding, she was added to the deed, which meant her claim was real. I wasn't going to pretend it wasn't, but I had solid documentation of my premarital equity. Not an airtight wall, the lawyer said, but substantial. Combined with 11 years of me being the only income, and Diana having no documented contribution to the property beyond the years she lived in it, I was in a workable position. The household account transactions tied to the affair weren't going to transform into a massive financial penalty for Diana in court, but they were useful for demonstrating a pattern. Her recorded admission that Eric usually paid but not always, and that she'd used our account for it was something the lawyer wanted to keep in the file. The assault was a different conversation. She asked me directly what happened, and I told her directly. Eric left without pressing charges as far as I knew. Nobody called the police that day, but the lawyer made it very clear that this was still a risk I was carrying, that if Eric or Diana's attorney decided to characterize what happened during the confrontation as grounds to undercut my credibility or complicate the proceedings, I'd given them something to work with. She told me to avoid all contact with Eric going forward. No texts, no confrontations, no showing up at his door. Whatever I was feeling, I needed to let the process do the rest. I could manage that. Diana came back 3 days later. I was in the kitchen when I heard her key in the lock, and I had about 2 seconds to decide how I was going to handle the next hour. She came in carrying the bag she'd left with. She looked like she hadn't slept well. She also looked, underneath the tired, like she'd been working on something, composing herself, rehearsing. She set the bag down and said she wanted to talk. I said okay. She started with counseling. She said she'd found a therapist who worked with couples in crisis. She had the number. She thought they could get through it if I was willing to try. She talked for a few minutes about what she'd learned about herself this week, about patterns she recognized now, about what she wanted for the marriage. She was calm and organized about it, which told me she'd practiced this. I let her finish. Eric was here for 8 months, I said. In my house, while I was at work, you hid him in my closet, you used our money for it. And when I found out, the first thing you told your parents was that I attacked someone without cause. She looked at her hands. I didn't say it was nothing, she said. I know what I did. I need to ask you something, I said. She looked up. Have you told anyone else about the recording? I asked. She went still just for a second. What do you mean? Diana, did you tell anyone, your parents, Eric, anyone, that you gave me a recorded statement? I asked. Her jaw tightened. I didn't know you were recording. I told you I was documenting your account, I reminded her. You didn't say you were going to, she stopped. Have you shown it to people? Your parents heard it, I answered. Her face did several things at once. You sent that to my parents. You told them I attacked someone for no reason, I said. I sent them the context. She stood up. Her voice jumped, not screaming, but the controlled version of something that wanted to be. You had no right to do that. You used my house, I said. You used my money, you used my schedule. You let me walk into my own bedroom and made me open my own closet. You called your mother from the car that night before the door was even cold. I had every right. She sat back down. The composure broke, not into crying, but into something older and quieter, like a held breath finally releasing. What do you want? She said. It wasn't really a question. I've already talked to an attorney, I said. The house is in my name. It was before we were married, and that matters legally. I'm not going to pretend I hold all the cards, but I've got more than you thought. She looked at me. So that's it. That's it, I confirmed. What about everything? She asked. 11 years, what about everything we built? I thought about the right way to say what I wanted to say next. I didn't want to make a speech. I wasn't interested in a speech. The marriage ended when I opened the closet, I said. I'm just finishing the paperwork. She left again that night. The bargaining stage has a shelf life, and she'd hit the end of it. After she went, I sat in the house for a while and listened to how quiet it was and tried to figure out if that was better or worse than the alternative. It was different mostly. It was very different. The divorce took about 9 months from filing to final. Not quick, not catastrophic. The house stayed mine. Her attorney made a run at the equity, which I'd expected, and we ended up settling in a way that gave Diana something for the years of marriage while keeping me in the property. I could live with the number. I won't pretend I loved writing it, but I could live with it. Diana rented a place on the other side of the city. Her parents had cooled considerably, not permanently estranged, not the unconditional refuge she'd been banking on, just different. She told them a version of the story, and then they'd heard the actual version, and whatever relationship they had after that required rebuilding from that foundation. Last I heard, she was doing some part-time administrative work. I don't follow it closely. Rachel and Eric were done within 2 months of my phone call. She'd gone through her own records after that night. Call logs, calendar entries, credit card statements, things only a spouse would think to look for, and she'd found enough to sketch the same picture Diana had given me in the living room. Dates Eric claimed he was at my garage. Evenings he'd said he was helping a neighbor. The scaffolding of 8 months of specific lies, still standing after the person who'd built it thought he'd gotten away. I don't know the details of their custody arrangement. I know Rachel became the primary residential parent, mostly because that's what she'd already been for years. She was the one who took them to school, to appointments, to their grandmother's house on Sundays. Eric's instability during the separation didn't help him. He moved into an apartment. I saw his car in the neighborhood a few times in the months after, and then less, and then not at all. I don't think about him much. What I think about sometimes is the moment before I opened the closet. That half second where I'd heard the shift and Diana had stopped talking and we were both just standing there and I still hadn't seen it yet. I didn't know then. That was the last moment I didn't know. When I think about Eric, it's not the cheekbone or the floor or him scrambling for the front door. That stuff fades. What stays with me is the image of him in my closet, crouched between my shirts, holding his shirt in his hand, half hidden behind the old winter jacket I hadn't worn in 3 years. Not the man who waved from the driveway, not the guy I'd lent tools to, just a man hiding in my house. That's what it was in the end, a man hiding in my house. I kept the house,